Welcome everyone and good afternoon. I'm Manveen, I'm the Learning and Insights Manager here at the MGAA, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our professional optics session this afternoon. It's great to have you join us. As always, before we start, I'm just going to run through a few housekeeping points. Again, shouldn't come as too much surprise for anyone that's been to one of these this year. You might notice that you can't turn your camera or microphone on just yet, and that's just to maximise the space for our presenter today, AKUR8 and Edwin, and minimise disruption for you when you're kind of listening and getting the most out of the session today. We will enable them at the end for you to engage with Q&A, so please don't worry. You can still speak with us, and we can still connect with you that way. We do ask that you don't use any AI note-taking tools, as we don't have permission of everyone attending to use these, but we are recording. So again, we'll make a copy of the recording available to you in due course. We do encourage and welcome questions. You can add them to the chat and the Q&A option, but we will address these mainly at the end. So please don't be too alarmed if we're not answering during the session. We will prioritise them at the end during the Q&A. As I mentioned, we are recording this session, and a link to the recording will be sent out to everyone that's registered with us, so please do keep an eye out for that, and you can always access that on our recordings on demand page. We also post a quick link in that email out to you, but also at the end of today's session, just asking for your feedback to continue bringing you the right content and great content for these sessions as well. And then finally, if you find that these sessions support your CPD, please do consider adding them onto your CPD log. That's all from me, and it just leaves me to introduce today's session, and I'm going to hand over to Edwin.
Thank you very much, Manveen, and thank you everyone for joining. The title today: Adapt to Market Changes Faster, Smarter Pricing for MGAs with AI, and it is the 17th of June. It is a little bit of a cheap title, I guess. The with AI is doing a little bit of work. I am going to get more into AI at the very end, but hopefully that will be an interesting section. And as Manveen says, please do ask questions as we go along, and I'll save some time at the end to answer them. So yeah, my name is Edwin Graham. I'm a principal actuarial data scientist at AKUR8, and here is the agenda for today. So I'm going to talk about the pricing cycle and what we want to get out of an efficient pricing cycle, processes for model monitoring and updating them, a little bit on deployment, and then I'm going to be talking more about technology and AI, including agentic AI, with the questions at the end. So the pricing cycle, insurance is backwards looking. We don't know what the future is going to contain, so we're looking back at the data we've gathered in the recent past, and we're building pricing models and layering in some expert judgment and some assumptions in order to price for risks that we're writing in the future. And although we may have an idea of how things might change in the future, and we might build those in, even those assumptions are based on our own historical understanding of what's just happened and what's about to happen. And the future is always uncertain. So there's lots of different things that are going to fluctuate and change in ways that are unpredictable. So customer behavior may change. We don't know exactly what inflation is going to do. The competitive environment may change. Our competitors may change their prices. They may keep them flat for a very long time and then suddenly tick them up on a certain date. Economic conditions will fluctuate and change. We may be getting the regulatory framework, the regulatory environment is a bit more predictable because things tend to be announced not on the day that they're put into practice, but the regulatory framework will change, and new technology will change, and we have climate change changing, among other things. And so with all of this changing all at once, we need to it can be very difficult to keep our prices are on track and aligned with what's going on right now. And the pricing cycle works like this. I mean, we start off today with our current state, looking at our KPIs. So for an MGA, you might be pricing just a commission. You might be pricing for the entire risk as well, and have full pricing authority, or you may not have pricing authority right now, and you may be listening in case in future you may have pricing authority. But you know, we're looking at the KPIs we care about: commission conversion rate, potentially also GWP, loss ratio, and the metrics of the models we're using to price. And we're looking at these, and then we're taking decisions based off them. What should we change? And this might involve not just the pricing team, but marketing and so on. We put whatever decision we take live into production, and that updates the state. We can then observe our new KPIs, our updated commission and conversion rate as things start earning through. And then the new state becomes the old state, and this process recurs on a looping basis. And one point I want to really get across is that the length of time that loop takes, and shortening that length of time, can be a lot more valuable than getting prices that are super accurate based on the past historical data that we observe. So if our prices are wrong, if the base rate levels are wrong, we can either be underpricing, where we're not making the margins that we ought to be making, or we could be overpricing and not getting the top line volume, the market share, not being able to take advantage of efficiencies of scale. If our segmentation is wrong, that can trigger adverse selection. Now, maybe an MGA that only cares about commission might not care about that, but still, for your commission segmentation, you may get adverse selection, whereby you're leaving money on the table for certain customers, and not writing the volume of business for some other segment of the population. So we don't want to be mispriced, and the longer that we don't act when all of those things that are changing in the future, as they shift and change, and as we gather data that shows that there's been a credible change, if we're not acting on that, then we're losing out. And certainly businesses that shorten this cycle and take advantage when they have that credible new data that's telling them that something has changed, adapting to that change, even if that's not the most sophisticated, and they're not building the most sophisticated and the best possible models, they can be winning more regularly, just because they're keeping track with reality much more closely than on average across the time period. So getting this loop rolling efficiently is really what pricing managers should be looking to do. And there are points in this process where there are traditional bottlenecks. So I'm going to highlight 4. There may be more than 4, but at the point at which new data arrives in the business, it may be stored in some warehouse with certain formatting. It might need to be extracted, reformatted, cleaned. There may need to be some merging and reconciliation between 2 or more sources of data, and that can be manual, slow, and slow down this loop. Once the data has been extracted, cleaned, reconciled, is ready for modeling and analysis, then rebuilding models can be very manual. So maybe we have to go through each variable by variable and do lots of grouping and binning and testing lots of models and iterating over and over again, and this can be inefficient. It can also not give you the best models because humans aren't necessarily the best at making decisions that actually could be data driven. If you have models that are ready, then actually what do we do with those? We don't just build a model and then put it into production. We look at what the impact of that update is going to be. We maybe iterate on this, do some impact analysis, scenario testing. This can be time consuming, again, depending on the technology you're using. And finally, once you've made that decision to put, to change something and put it into production, we may need to reformat it, hand it over to IT. We may need to rebuild it into a production system, and then might need to go through testing and reconciliation. This can be a long and drawn out process as well. And so if we work on these bottlenecks and sort them out, we can really speed up this loop and get much more efficient about converting the data that we already hold into business value. So I'm going to focus on the second of those points, the model building, and yeah, then we have some AI discussion coming up after that. Model monitoring and updating. So we have models in production, and when we built those models, they were performing very well. Of course, we're mostly testing them on historical data. We put them into production. New data is generated, and we get that data and we start looking at it. And some of those models, because the future is going to look like the past, but not completely like the past, all those things that are changing, our models are going to be either good, they may have drifted and may need some action to take to update them. They may be completely misaligned with reality. They may be needed to be rebuilt from the ground up. And so we need a process to take that data and assess the performance of our models, and whether we need to even take any action. If we do need to take action, what action do we need to take? And there's sort of two ways of going about the sort of model monitoring process. So firstly, we can build some dashboards and reports that show us here our models are misaligned with reality. We're under predicting in this segment, over predicting in this segment. Or we can rebuild models using the current models as an offset and see, is there anything statistically significant in the model residual that we should then take some action against? And traditionally, doing the sort of an analysis using dashboards and reports and manually looking through variable by variable was quicker than rebuilding from the ground up, because rebuilding the models with the current models as an offset, because doing anything that requires modeling will require lots of sort of manual variable selection, binning, pre-processing, and doing a bit of gap analysis and understanding, well, it's these three variables and I should make these adjustments is quicker. These days with modern machine learning techniques, a lot of the rebuilding, the model rebuilding can be done more or less automatically. And so actually it's on the right hand side where we can actually do things more quickly, and that's a good thing, because when we're actually rebuilding the models, we're seeing, we're taking correlations of variables into account, and we're really seeing it is these variables that we need to update, and here is exactly how we should update them. Talking of models and automated models, I want to talk about two different types of modeling. We have a sort of traditional GLM rating table style models that can be they're very transparent. Traditionally, they are a bit more manual to build, and we have black box for machine learning type models like GBMs, which may be more maybe easier to fit, and rebuild, but are less transparent. And I think there is a trade-off between these two approaches. Black box models can be a lot more accurate. That's not necessarily always the case, but it's particularly the case where there's a lot of high volume of data, because they can find those sort of deep interactions that are difficult to find from a traditional rating table style model. And they can be run very quickly. And sometimes, particularly in markets that are very price sensitive, often the UK personal lines is a very price sensitive market. People buy things on aggregators, and the fact that it's very price sensitive means that there are that sort of amplifies any adverse selection and really guides us towards wanting to have models that are more accurate. And so maybe in the UK motor, we would the trade-off makes more sense to go for a GBM, whereas in other lines of business, maybe the trade-off we prefer to have some transparency and be using rating table style models. One really good thing about rating table style models, well, A, they can be automated much more efficiently today than ever before, and they can be very flexible once you put them into production. So they're much easier to update than a GBM, because you can see that there's one variable where there's been some drift. Well, I can just update the coefficients for that one variable, and that's very, very quick to do, and it's very easy to build a process around that and putting that into production. However, I'm definitely not anti-GBM. I think there's some really strong use cases for GBMs as well. I don't want to focus too much on this slide, but only to say that when we're doing a modeling exercise, if we just take, if we rebuild some models, we have some new data, and we put those models and compare them against our current models, and they're better, should we just go ahead and put them into production? The answer is probably not, and that's because every model has some independence. If they're built on different data sets, especially so, we try to build models that contain signal and don't contain any noise from the training data, but every model has some influence from noise in the training data. And actually, there's probably a model that's someone halfway in between or somewhere in between the two models that maybe performs even better than either of those two models. Model ensembling works very well as a way of reducing model variance. I don't recommend it necessarily. I don't recommend having two models and putting it in a sort of weighted average of both into production, because it will get super complex. But we can do things like, when we rebuild our new models, regularizing against our current models, so we minimize the deviation away from our current models. This also has the added benefit of reducing the disruption when we make a pricing update. And so, yes, I think we want to minimize any deviation away from our current models, and I won't go into any more detail unless there are questions on this at the end. Talking about minimizing the difference from our existing models, well, a credibility procedure is an approach that combines, I say, claims experience. This works for any model. So I'm thinking in the sort of MGA space, we're mainly focusing on conversion models or competitor price models. But whatever the model is, we have some existing beliefs about what's going on. That might be our current models. Then we have some new data. And a credibility approach is an approach that weights these two elements. And if we use a credibility approach, that can be a very good way of getting new signal out of data without overfitting and without, while minimizing the difference, the deviation from our current models. And that can allow us to go through this pricing cycle much more quickly, while still, acting on whatever statistically credible information is coming through in our new data. For MGAs working only on commission models and sort of demand and price elasticity, the data matures very quickly. Unlike maybe if the carrier is building risk models taking the risk data, the claims data takes a long time to mature. Conversion data doesn't take that long to mature. So really getting this smooth, quick pricing cycle is really even more important for MGAs in particular. I'm going to skip this slide, but this talks about a specific credibility technique where we would end up with building rating table style models updated in a credibility based approach. This is an approach we use in our software. Again, if there's questions on it, we can go into more detail. But to summarize all of what I've said and to apply that to a pricing update, when we have new data coming, that we put something into production, we're generating new data based on our existing pricing. We want to efficiently get whatever statistically credible information is in that data and apply it and put it into production, but not overreact to that. Therefore, what we should be looking to do is finding whatever motivated changes, pricing changes we should make. So a price change should be motivated. We want to be updating our prices to better represent the new reality than our existing models did. And we want this to be quick. So we want, once we have that evidence in our business, we don't want to be sitting on it for an extra month or 3 months or 6 months before we take that action. Of course, it takes time to do this properly and to make sure we're doing it in a robust way. But all else being equal, we want it to be quick. And again, all else being equal, we want it to be minimal. So we don't want to, we understand what's going on today at the current prices, and we want to minimize any deviation away from that, all else being equal. So of course, if we really have strong evidence we want to change, we want to change, but we want to change without causing as much disruption, without causing any disruption really, but with minimizing the amount of disruption. Yeah, okay. So why do we want to do that? Well, in the short term, if our rates are constantly being updated when reality changes and when we have good, statistically credible evidence that reality has changed, then we're getting that short-term value from keeping our prices aligned with that shifting reality. In the longer term, it means that we're not queuing up lots of price changes to make all in one go. So making small, regular updates is better than queuing up all of those small updates into one big update that we have to make all in one go, which could be very disruptive, hard to manage. Yeah, you will sink a lot of your human resources into getting that big pricing update in and understanding all of the impacts and tracking and monitoring them. Whereas if we're making short updates, small updates, we need to only there's only small things that we need to track. It's much less disruptive. It's much easier to manage. And the good news is that a lot of the steps can be automated. So we have automated credibility-driven approaches to building our models, and finding that credible statistical information amongst the noisy data that we've been collecting. So to conclude all of this section, what should a pricing manager, a pricing leader be aiming to do? They should be aiming to build and maintain pricing processes that can convert the data that we're collecting, plus all of the expert judgment embedded in your team of pricing experts, into real business value. And yeah, that means being efficient, but also, you know, we want to trade off speed with you know, getting things right. Where our pricing processes are complex, complexity can add value if it delivers better prices, more aligned with reality, that are delivering more value. And what tends to happen is complexity will build up over time. So we'll do a project, we find that doing something this way and adding in this extra layer of complexity adds a little bit of value. So we'll add it in, and then we'll do something else and we'll add that in and add that in and add that in, and the complexity can build up layer upon layer upon layer. And I really believe that, it's not my concept, but I really believe that pricing teams have a complexity budget above which it really becomes increasingly hard to manage change. And so what we really want to do is, you know, we want to build up that complexity where it's adding value, but at the same time, we need to be evaluating our pricing process and stripping out complexity where it's no longer adding value. So, you know, if the complexity justifies itself with a high long-term return on investment, brilliant, keep it. Where it doesn't, we want to avoid it. Good tools and technology, I think this is obvious, can reduce the trade-off between sophistication and time to market. So good tools and technology allow us to do more complex things, or more sophisticated things in a simpler way, or a quicker, easier way. They handle the complexity for us, and that allows us to focus on the things that we can do to really add business value. All else being equal, we definitely want to be as accurate as possible. So we want our models, our assumptions to be aligned with reality. And the more price sensitive the market, the line of business, the more we should trade, you know, in that trade-off between accuracy and transparency and speed. The more price sensitive a market, the more we should favor, you know, the more weight we should put on our pricing process delivering accurate results, and the more we should invest in our pricing teams and our pricing technology. But yes, building a process that's flexible and adaptive can be more valuable in the long run, because, you know, we can build up that that speed to market. We can build up that pricing loop such that, you know, we're really, you know, as soon as we have credible information, we are reacting to it, but not overreacting to it. Pricing updates should be motivated, timely, minimal. Those are my three key attributes of a pricing update. And for all these reasons, little and often should be preferred, and that stops us from storing up complexity in the long run. Cool. We have finished this segment. Please do put any questions you have in the chat. We're going to get to it soon. Deployment. So deployment was another one of those possible bottlenecks that was on one of those previous slides. So if we've gone through the process, we've built the model, we've done all the impact analysis, we've iterated, we've agreed, we've signed it off. All of our stakeholders are aligned. We want to put this into production. Any time between that time and the time that it actually goes into production is costly. And there are not too many good reasons for it to be, I mean, it shouldn't necessarily be immediate, because we do want to do some testing and actually have the guardrails in place, but it should not be, it should not take a week, a month, 6 months, a year. If it's taking you that long to put something into production, that's something that should be a red flag. You should be focusing and investing on making that much smoother process. And yes, on the other hand, pricing areas can be incredibly costly. We do want to make sure that whatever update we are putting into production is thoroughly reviewed, has gone through all the testing it needs to be done, and we have all the appropriate guardrails in place to ensure that we're not sort of rushing to production just because we feel the ticking clock pressure. So a traditional deployment, and your deployment may look nothing like this. You may have great technology, but yeah, a traditional deployment could look something like this. So we sign off our rates. We're using a software that our IT team don't know how to use or don't know how to understand, and so therefore we need to take our rates out of whatever software we built them in and rebuild them in Excel before handing them over to an IT team. That creates risk of errors, duplication. The IT team then takes them and rebuilds them again into the production system, the staging environment. There's then an iterative loop where the first time it's been copied once, it's been copied twice. There's going to be errors. It's not going to work first time. So therefore, there's a ton of reconciliation and adjustment and retesting and re-reconciliation and adjustment. Finally, it gets signed off and then scheduled for the next IT change window. And then when that comes around, it's finally deployed into production. There's no real reason in 2026 for a deployment to look like that. Of course, duplicating more than once or at all greatly increases the length of time to production, because we have to go through that reconciliation exercise and the rebuilding exercise. So all this to say that an integrated pricing engine owned by the pricing team that can directly deploy rates immediately from the software that you're using to build your rates is something I recommend. Now, I'm biased. I of course work for a company that's selling a deployment solution. This is agnostic. This could be we build everything in Python, and we have a deployment where that Python code gets wrapped up in a pickle file and pushed into our production environment. However it works, what we should avoid is this sort of long traditional manual repeatedly copying and rebuilding process that the last months or years. We need a solution that is sort of days at most, or if not hours. So technology and agentic AI, I sort of teased you all by having the AI in the title. So here I'm going to get to it. So before I talk about agentic AI, existing technology that's not been around forever, but machine learning technology and automation that isn't what we think about when we think about AI, is really breaking down these bottlenecks already. So the data extraction, formatting, cleaning, reconciliation, there are tools, pre ChatGPT and pre Claude. There are tools that do this really, really well and can do this in a very automated way. That sort of manual iterative modeling to detect model drift. We can have machine learning techniques that do this automatically, either the black box or rating table style models. It can be done automatically. Doing the rating updates, impact analysis, scenario testing, visual actuarial platforms that have a lot of pre-built analyses and analyses that just update when you make a change, and where you can compare deltas, this scenario versus this scenario side by side, with a couple of clicks, allows that process to be much smoother. And of course, if you have an integrated pricing engine, that can remove all of the duplication, all of the handoffs, all the reconciliation exercises, and put the pricing really in the hands of the pricing team, the deployment really in the hands of the pricing team. So I think really agentic AI and the AI tools we have probably in the last year, and certainly in the future, can build on top of this. So essentially the way I see AI, they're doing some very human looking things, but essentially they are doing automation, and allowing the human being to focus more on the things that the human can do better than the machine today. So it's building on top of those existing technologies, and it's improving things. So let's go one by one. So yes, modern integrated data platforms allow for fast data extraction and building a automated, clean pipeline. But that still involves maybe a lot of coding. And nowadays, maybe we can do this using some unstructured prompts. We can say, extract and clean this data, and we can iterate using prompts. And of course, one thing that AI tools are really good at is prototyping. So you can get a prototype of a automated data pipeline very, very quickly, and then build and iterate on top of that. So you can really improve upon each one of these parts of the process and other parts of the process that are not mentioned here. Modeling. So pricing teams could build and maintain full modeling monitoring workflows just using unstructured prompts using agentic AI. So I want to import this model and compare it to this model, and I want you to create these plots, and the AI goes away and builds it. Yeah. Scenario testing as well. So rather than having to manually build the reports and dashboards that then get automatically updated with new data, again, the agentic AI can do that part for you as well. So yeah, and then again, it's giving you more time to experiment, test different pricing strategies, and again apply the human expertise and judgment where you're really adding value as a human. And with the pricing engine now, I spent a lot of time saying, this is terrible. This traditional deployment, it's not the way you should do it. But let's say that's all you've got. Well, agentic AI can really help you speed through the rebuilding, the testing, the reconciliation. But if there is an integration, I think that's even better. And then agents can allow users to do more. So, for example, if you need to build a specific test for a deployment, AI agents can do that for you very quickly, starting from an unstructured prompt. And I do think that the way we should think about AI, at least in the short term, is as an evolution of and building on top of the technology, the advances we've made in technology in the last decades. So if we go back to the 1970s, GLMs weren't really a thing in pricing, but every now and again an actuary could build a GLM, but they would be actually building the GLM by hand and doing all the matrix multiplication by hand. Now, obviously, a human being is not as good at doing matrix multiplication accurately and quickly as a computer. And by the 90s, we had software that can fit GLMs. And then the human being would be iterating to manually changing the GLM structure and clicking refit and testing, building the model in that sort of manual iterative way. Today, we've cut out a lot of that manual iteration. The machine learning models can actually find the best model structure as well as fitting the models automatically. Then, today, pricing experts are spending their time setting up that machine learning problem and understanding and analyzing the output. With agentic AI, maybe we don't have to spend as much time describing the machine learning problem in a structured way. We can write an unstructured prompt, and the agentic AI can generate a structured machine learning project that will run automatically. It will find the best model structure. It will fit that model, and maybe then we can, it's then on the human being to start analyzing the output again, and again, we can use agentic AI potentially to help us do that, to sort of do what if, and I said, well, what if we change this, and we're using unstructured prompts, but we're still at the center of the process, and adding, spending more time adding business value as a human expert and less time doing things that machines can do better. Now, that's current technology. I will say, that one thing that maybe feels a bit different is than past technologies is the pace of change, and just how human they can feel. And I don't know when it will happen, but when AI research becomes almost entirely run by agentic AI, there could be an explosion, and we could be looking at lots of the human work being taken away. At the moment, I don't see that with the current agentic AI technology. I may be wrong. We can discuss this in the Q&A. But in the near future, if we don't have a sort of general AI explosion where all of our desk jobs are at risk, then the way I would see it is that AI is doing more of the repetitive work, automating more of the work, and we can spend our time thinking about what we want to prototype, what we want to test, and how to interpreting and analyzing the output and understanding the impacts, and spending more time applying actuarial judgment, and less time sort of building and clicking and dragging and dropping. Well, for that to happen, we need AI agents that are curated by experts, that generate output that is transparent as it can be, and is traceable, and can be interpreted by the human being, and where we have the guardrails in place to ensure safety and alignment. And the way I see it is that the same reason that there's a decision that companies need to make: do we buy off-the-shelf software or do we build everything ourselves in Python? I think the same will be true for agentic AI. Do we build and maintain our own agents and invest all of our time and energy into managing our MCP server and all the rest, or companies like AKUR8, who are the experts in these things? We are building agents that that have these guardrails, that are curated, and produce output that's transparent, traceable, and aligned with actuarial workflows. At any rate, that is the end of what I had to say, which gives us about 15 minutes for questions. Manveen, do you mind unmuting and maybe prioritizing the questions that's...
Yeah. We haven't had any come through yet, but I don't know if that's because people are waiting just to finish. But if anyone does have any questions, you've got the chat, you've got the Q&A, and I'm just turning everyone's cameras and microphones on. So you've also got the raise hand function. Any questions? Please pick one of those three options. I'll just give everyone a moment to reach out.
While that moment is happening, can I just do a shameless plug for the AKUR8 Academy, which is your global training and upskilling. Actually, I can't read that because the thing's at the top. Community for insurance. Yeah, you can read it. And yeah, there's a QR code here if you want to explore the AKUR8 Academy. Did anyone write a question?
That moment has helped, so perfectly timed. We've had a question come in, probably more a bit of a kind of getting your opinion here. Okay. Agentic versus orchestral approach, which is best here?
I don't feel qualified to answer the question, so I don't know the definitions well enough to weigh in. I apologize. That's a really bad start for a Q&A.
No, not at all. A follow-up question then. Hopefully, this one's a bit more in line, and we'll obviously feel free to take that question away if that helps. If Edwin, I can always drop it to you via email,
Sure,
and we'll come back to the individual that's asked that.
Yeah.
But we've got another question come in to say, can you please explain more about the black box method?
Sure. So there's not one black box method. I'm talking about general machine learning models that can have sort of any structure. So a rating table style model, a GLM, is a model structure where the effect of each variable can essentially be entirely separated and analyzed independently and edited independently. And so they're very flexible and easy to interpret, and easy to edit manually, and inject some of your human expertise into them. A black box model is something more like a neural network or a GBM or a random forest, where it uses the same inputs and you get a prediction as an output, but it's much more, the structure is much more sort of tangled up, and it's difficult to understand actually what all of the impacts of each of the variables that you've used in the model are independently. And that is obviously a negative. There are many use cases where we don't care too much about whether the model is transparent or not. We want it to be as accurate as possible, and we want to use the output, yeah, we don't care. There are other applications where there's a trade-off, where we would rather have the transparency, but we think the black box model is that much more accurate that we would prefer to use the black box model in this use case. And then there are other use cases where they're just not applicable, or you would never use them. So in the US, where it's highly regulated and you need to have rating tables, you can't deploy a GBM, for example. But they tend to be very easy to fit. So you can write a few lines of code and click run, and you'll get a model. But yes, they're less interpretable.
Fantastic, thank you. And obviously, please let me know if there's any follow-up to that. Any further questions? We've only had the two come in, but I appreciate there's a lot of content and information Edwin has given us, so perhaps some things to mull over as well. I'm just going to see if anyone's got any follow-up or any final or further questions. We've still got time this afternoon.
Does anyone disagree with me about is anyone more sort of negative on AI? Does anyone think that we're all at risk? Anyone with a desk job? Once upon a time, humans were the best at playing chess, and we thought that would machines can never have that intuition that human intuition is needed to play the right moves at the right time, and we flew past that point. And are we on the verge of flying past that point for all desk jobs, and our actuaries on the verge of extinction, or because I think that's quite a negative. I would disagree with that unless we have another step change in the technology that's available. I think anyone who's worked with AI has seen that it can do some incredible things, but also can make some incredible mistakes, or just not do the right thing. And having the human being working with the AI seems to be the best of both worlds, and I think that's how it's going to play out in the short term, at least.
Yeah, interesting question. It'd be good to get the audience's thoughts on how they see AI.
If there's a time frame that people would, because maybe in 100 years machines are doing everything for us, but maybe in 5 years that won't be the case. Does anyone have an estimate of when that time will come? If not, no worries. Let's we can If there's, is there anything more? Has anyone written anything at all?
No further questions. But
Okay.
again, I think that's probably given food for thought, like you said about
Yes.
AI, not AI hallucinations, AI not quite getting things right,
Mm.
but also where AI does help.
Mm.
I mean, I suppose if I'm weighing in, don't think
Yep.
we're all in quite jeopardy just yet. I think
No.
we'll still need humans to kind of engage and deliver content and continue the conversation going forward. So I think we're probably at least safe for that 5 year you mentioned there, Edwin. Maybe we could all reconvene on the 17th of June 2031,
Yes.
and that might be a slightly different answer for us all. But no further questions. Oh, just checking. Hang on. No, we've just had one come in, so
Okay,
bear with
perfect.
me. Just going to check. How long do you think it would take to set up an efficient pricing cycle from data collection to data deployment? Oh, sorry, data collection to deployment. Apologies.
So I guess it very much depends. So I guess let's say you're starting a new company. Let's say that you have all of the other everything else in place, the policy admin system that's doing the things it needs to do, and getting the data into a data warehouse that's sort of relatively modern. Then you need to think about data extraction and cleaning, modeling, impact analysis, scenario testing, rate making, scenario testing, impact analysis. If you're looking at an off-the-shelf software, yes, I mean, I don't want to be too ambitious and say, everything's going to be done in weeks. If you're looking for an end-to-end process where you're also having the pricing team in charge of deployment, that does involve some IT work, and setting everything up in defining what your data formats, data structures should look like, what it is that you're modeling, and yeah, this loop, this process, the first time you would go through it might be quite painful and might not be with the same process as it would be the 10th or 100th time you went through it. So every time you go through this the pricing cycle, you could be adding moving more and more closely towards your target process. And so getting something up and running where you're actually delivering value could be weeks. I mean, if it's end to end and you have the technology, the deployment as well, probably you're looking more at months. But yeah, optimistically, let's say months. If you're building everything yourself in Python, yeah, that's definitely a valid approach. It will take longer, but maybe it will be more tailored to what you want to do, and maybe it's the right approach. But yeah, I think it's a very vague answer, but months would be my answer.
I hope that's helped answer that question. And if there's any follow-up, please just write a comment below your question. We've actually had another one come through, Ross,
Nice.
so they're all coming in quite nicely now.
Okay.
We're being asked, considering the difference in language used between the end user and those making the insurance products, I feel there'll always be a place for people in between the two. In the insurance industry was also one which grew considerably following the introduction of IT. I'm not sure what the exact question is there. Apologies. But maybe just obviously interesting if you've got anything you want to weigh in there on Edward. I'm going to read it again just because
we could treat it as a
lot
comment
to consider.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Considering the difference in language used between the end user and those making the insurance products, I feel there will always be a place for people in between the two. Insurance was also one which grows considerably following the introduction of IT. Okay, any thoughts on that? And then we've got another question that's just come through too.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, humans can only be experts in a limited field. So if you're an expert in IT and you're working in IT for insurance, you're not necessarily going to know all of the actuarial terminology. The same for actuaries working with that IT team. The same for the customers at the end. So yes, that's, I agree, and I will happily to treat that as a comment rather than a question.
Yeah, no, actually, we just had a response to, actually, that was their response also to AI taking jobs. So again, interesting to get that kind of comparison of thoughts, but also, like you said, that agreement of thoughts. I don't know if you've got anything to add, otherwise I'm going to jump to the question we've just had to come in.
In 100 years' time, maybe the AI can be an expert in every field and understand itself, and so it can take everything. But yeah, I think yes, absolutely right. I do still see, however human the AI feels, it still is a technology that needs to be used and controlled by human beings. Today's technology, the context window of an agent is only going to be so big, so it's not going to be it's going to be more narrowly focused, I guess, than the idea is that you as a human being, it's more like you're controlling a team, and your agents are the team, and maybe you then have agents that control agents who are those sort of team leaders, and you're controlling a bigger team, but you're achieving more essentially of what you were setting out to do. I'm not an AI expert. I think you can tell from that question. But yeah, I mean, I just agree. And my point from before, here, it does feel like a very different technology, and it some of the things it does are incredible. But I do think you can think of it as simply an evolution of, we use technology to automate things that actually humans don't need to be doing. I don't need to be doing matrix multiplication by hand, when a data-driven approach is better. The one thing I had, look how incredible each one of these posters is that was AI generated, but they all look the same, and they all look in some ways not actually that good. So like AI can be really, really incredible, but at the same time, it is quite limited. It's more limited than maybe some people give it credit for today. And yeah, I really believe that the integration of human beings with technology is an evolution of where we've been going for the last 50 years, and that's, AI just fits in with that.
Fantastic. We've got just one final question and just enough time to cover it.
Yeah.
Given the speed of the changes in agentic AI, would you say that decisions on buying software which haven't adapted to these changes, in particular use of Gen AI at the implementation of the software, will and should slow down potentially?
Yeah, I'd be happy saying that. Yes. I mean, maybe. I don't have really an interesting answer to that question, but yeah. I think, and will the speed continue? I don't know what the speed of progress is going to look like in the next 5 or 10 years, and I think that the fact that you now have AI building, or working alongside AI researchers to build the next generation of AI, to build the next one, means it, it could accelerate very quickly. Or we may have just seen a step change recently, and it may sort of level off. It's very difficult for me to judge what's going to happen next, but yeah, I do agree with the implication of that question.
Fantastic. Well, that's all our questions. Obviously, if anyone does have any more, feel free to reach out to Edwin, or if you'd want to reach out via the MGAA directly, please do. All that's left is to say thank you for coming along today. If you've got some time before you head off, feel free to give your feedback. But thank you very much for our members for joining us, and thank you again to our member AKUR8 for coming along, and particularly Edwin for delivering such an insightful session. And I hope you all have a lovely rest of day. Take care all.
Thank you.